As we've heard by now, the Pope has made some pretty strong anti-capitalist statements, and this has got everybody in an uproar, and everybody's talking about it and wondering exactly what this means. Well, I'll tell you, for me, it doesn't mean anything. Apparently, somebody finally got around to reading that part of the Bible where Jesus spoke against the rich and said that the poor were the real people and that they should be held above everybody else, and that getting rich was actually bad. Apparently, someone finally got around to reading that part. Pope Francis said that the adultery of money in a secular society would lead to a new tyranny. Well, actually, the tyranny of capital has been around for several hundred years. Apparently, the church is just starting to figure this out, the way it seems to be behind everything by a couple of hundred years, like abortion, homosexuality, and women's rights. Yes, it's actually very surprising that the Pope would be so anti-capitalist, considering in the past popes have always been very anti-communist. In fact, they've been very anti-communist to the point of being blatant tools for people like Reagan and Thatcher, who are some of the most evil human beings who have ever lived. In fact, the major issue for Pope Francis has been economic inequality in society, and that he believes wealth should be more equitably distributed. Some people continue to defend trickle-down theories, which assume that economic growth encouraged by a free market will inevitably succeed in bringing about greater justice and inclusiveness in the world. This opinion, which has never been confirmed by the facts, expresses a crude and naive trust in the goodness of those wielding economic power and in the sacred workings of the prevailing economic system. Now, I assume that the Pope will be handing over some of the trillions and trillions of dollars they have to the poor, preferably to the people who have been victims of Catholic priests. Now, this has caused a huge uproar among Catholics, particularly right-wing Catholics, the ones who haven't yet figured out that their economic beliefs and their religious beliefs are in complete contradiction. One of those people being Paul Ryan. You'll remember he ran as vice president. He has been a devout Catholic, but also a devout follower of the free market. Now we're going to have to see where this leads. Him and other people who consider themselves to be right-wing and Catholics have to see which one of their faiths is actually going to win out on this one. Is it going to be what Jesus actually wrote, or the dead opposite? Oh, Sun News Network personality Michael Corrin, I've got you in mind for this. Now, on the surface, can we really be that surprised that Pope Francis feels this way? Well, he did work in Buenos Aires in Argentina, and he was around in 2001 when the major collapse happened there. And since then, he's really dedicated himself to helping the poor. And unlike the vast, overwhelming majority of religions, he actually carried it out. He actually went out into the streets and helped poor people. He shunned having great things himself. He shunned materialism for himself, and instead actually dedicated his life to helping the poor. In fact, he's one of the few people in the world that when he was doing that, I actually believed him that he cared about the poor. And this wasn't just a selfish act of trying to get into heaven. He genuinely really did care. So I'm not really too surprised that he would make a statement like this, given where he comes from and what he actually did. However, we should not lose sight of what this could mean. Now, this could give a lot to so-called Christian communists, people who like to fuse their religious beliefs with communism and socialism, a tactic that doesn't work, and two things that really shouldn't belong together. We should never forget what Karl Marx actually said on this subject, and this applies to even those who try to fuse socialism with Islam as well. What they upbraid the bourgeoisie with is not so much that it creates a proletariat as it creates a revolutionary proletariat. In political practice, therefore, they join in all coercive measures against the working class, and in ordinary life, despite their highfalutin phrases, they stoop to pick up the golden apples dropped from the tree of industry, and to barter truth, love, and honor for traffic in wool, beetroot sugar, and potato spirits. As the parson has ever gone hand in hand with the landlord, so has the clerical socialism with feudal socialism. Nothing is easier than to give Christian aestheticism a socialist tinge. Has not Christianity declaimed against private property, against marriage, against the state? Has it not preached in the place of these charity and poverty, celibacy and mortification of the flesh, monastic life and mother church? Christian socialism is but the holy water with which the priest consecrates the heart-burnings of the aristocrat. In the end, this drive for socialism using the church as a guide, this Christian socialism, is inherently reactionary because the church does always ally with the ruling class if it wants to protect itself, particularly against socialism and other secular ideas. And this is no different than how the church has allied itself to the crown in various countries where leaders now have a supposed religious right to lead. We don't need this. This will not work. This is, again, another one of those situations where revolutionary struggle is necessary. There has to be a radical break from ideas like this. Liberation, particularly economic liberation, is not going to come from church. Any church. It has to come from a struggle of the people against the bourgeoisie. Besides, if he keeps going on like this, he's probably going to find himself dead at the hands of the princes of the church, the people who actually control the doctrine. It's also important to remember a little bit of history about Pope Francis when it comes to Argentina. Now, during the military junta, it was considered illegal or wrong for a priest to argue on behalf of the poor or to support the poor, meaning anything that challenged the military junta. Now, one of the things that happened to a priest who happened to do this was that they would be abducted and tortured and dumped in a field. Now, they weren't killed, but they were certainly tortured. Now, you see, the church and fascism have always had a really nice, cozy relationship. Pope Francis being no different. In fact, the church got along with them so well, Pope Francis at the time had a way of letting the Argentinian government know it was okay to abduct and torture particular priests by revoking his license to be a priest, so to speak. That was the signal from the Catholic Church to say, yeah, you know what, you can go ahead after this guy. All I'm really saying is that this will not lead to liberation at all. It is, again, clerical socialism, which is inherently reactionary. And this Pope isn't really quite the good guy he seems to be. Thank you for watching. Go ahead, rate, comment, subscribe, share on various social media. And if you want, there's some other great content here you could check out.